Hey y'all, welcome to episode 14 of DEI in 5. Today I want to talk about what we should be doing when folks are resisting DEI efforts. Last week on March 1st, there was an article published on HBR, Harvard Business Review, that was written by 3 psychology researchers. And their recent research focused on the psychology of social change and how to leverage those findings to overcome resistance to diversity, equity, and inclusion work. I'll be sure to link the article below, but this article couldn't be any more timely because I've had a lot of conversations recently with people around what to do if folks are resisting DEI. And sometimes the response is just like, focus on the people that aren't resisting, that do want to do the work. But the problem lies when the folks resisting are leaders, are decision makers, and that creates a pretty significant problem, right? So if you've been following what's going on in the DEI space, you're probably aware of the sudden uprise against DEI efforts over the past few months, at least the public uprise of it. Across a variety of domains, a number of organizations have dialed back their DEI efforts. They've laid off teams. They've gotten rid of, chief diversity officers, VPs of DEI, etc. But there's also this whole thing happening within the educational space as well, particularly in Florida. If you haven't been keeping up with the Stop Woke Act from DeSantis, as well as House Bill 999, I definitely encourage you to check that out. But back to this article, and I'm going to try to fly through this. There's a lot to cover here. But these 3 researchers, they wrote this article, and I have to say it, but it still grinds my gears to no end that there is such a lack of diversity amongst those who are doing research in DEI, but that is for another video. I actually posted a video about that recently, so you can check that out on my channel, but it does frustrate me, but that's not why we're here. The article itself, it delves into 3 primary forms of resistance to DEI initiatives: defending, denying, and distancing. And so the researchers identified that these forms of resistance are often driven by psychological threats such as status threat, merit threat, and moral threat. So I want to break this down and also just kind of highlight or put this into a sort of practical, share some practical experiences, because I think they did a good job of sharing their research, but there aren't a lot of, hey, here, try this thing that aligns with the research. So DEI initiatives can elicit threat and concern, especially from members of majority groups who feel that their status or resources may be threatened. And so that's what they refer to as status threat. The second one, merit threat, they said, some individuals may feel like that recognizing the existence of bias, discrimination, and inequality challenges their achievements and their personal merits. So merit threat, very meta. And then finally, some individuals may feel that acknowledging their privilege and connection to an unfair system undermines their moral standing. And this is what we call the moral threat. And so that is the most common one that they identified. And based on the research, it is pretty aligned with what I've seen in terms of connecting with cognitive dissonance, or the discomfort that people often feel when they're battling internally, what their behavior is and what their moral beliefs or values are. They go on to talk about in the article about how when individuals experience one or more of these threats, they tend to resist DEI initiatives in 3 primary ways: defending, denying, distancing. And so defending involves justifying and trying to maintain the current status quo. Denying involves downplaying or denying the existence of inequality or bias. And then distancing involves acknowledging, but really personally disconnecting from the issue. So there are some examples of each of these in the article. Again, I encourage you to go read it. But to address these forms of resistance, they recommend that organizational leaders try a few things, right? So to reduce the status threat, they suggest that we should be highlighting the long-term benefits of DEI initiatives for everyone, which is essentially highlighting the business case. Funny enough, I just posted last week about how pushing the business case for DEI can be harmful. But in this case, they're talking, and the researchers also recognize this, that there could be harm. But in this case specifically, they're talking about leveraging it to tackle status threat in an effective way. So helping people shift their mindset away from this zero sum way of thinking, or a way of thinking where, if one person wins or one group wins, another group has to lose or have something taken away. And just to kind of put that theory into practice, I've found that it is really effective to work one-on-one with leaders in the DEI space when they are resisting change, to help them connect the dots between, why this work matters and why it should matter to them. It is hand-holding, there's a lot of coddling that takes place, and a lot of people don't like to do it. Sometimes I don't like to do it, but the reality of it is, if these are the decision makers and the people that hold the power within an organization and we're not working with them, we keep walking in a circle and changes don't happen, right? So taking time to really help leaders understand why this work matters, why they should be considering other perspectives and identities and types of people is really important. Second part, to address merit threat, the researchers recommend using self-affirmation exercises to bolster self-esteem and make it easier for people to accept information that challenges their beliefs. Now, this one's interesting. It, again, feels very hand-holdish, but from a psychological standpoint, it makes sense, right? In general, we as humans, if we are holding ourselves with high self-esteem, anything that comes our way, any sort of information that may threaten who we are, or that aspect of who we are less likely to consider it threatening. And so, again, theory to practice, one of the things that I like to do, especially with leaders, is to have these retrospectives where we reflect together collectively. And the first thing I really have them think about is, what about our leadership style, our practices, our behaviors, et cetera, are actually working well and benefiting our company or organization. And then from there, once we've affirmed those things that are sort of inclusive leadership best practices, we move on to talk about the things that we could start to change. We think about potential challenges and roadblocks moving forward, et cetera. And shameless plug, I also do a similar thing in my new workbook that I self-published, the Inclusive Leadership Journal. I'll link it below. But same thing, reflecting on who you are, your skills, what's going well, where's the sort of room for improvement, etc. And then finally, the researchers suggest redirecting moral threat by reframing DEI initiatives as opportunities to express moral ideas and repair moral standing. So really thinking about these ideas of equity and fairness, right, as universal ideas that we should all commit to, instead of tying those ideas to discrimination or privilege. Now, this is probably my least favorite, because my interpretation, and I'm kind of reading between the lines of what they shared in the article, is, instead of calling out specific isms like racism, sexism, ageism, that we should instead kind of be thinking about DEI just sort of this high level. I think we need to do both, right? I think people need to reflect on their individual power and privilege. There's no doubt about that. To really understand how other people are being impacted and how your advantage may be a disadvantage for someone else. And what needs to happen is that people need to sort of, we have to push this idea that diversity isn't just on race and ethnicity. That is how we started and built DEI historically. However, when we're talking about diversity, we're thinking about so many other elements. So I myself even need to think about my power and privilege as it relates to other Black women, right? So there's opportunity for us all to focus on that, but then to also think about the general sort of human good, putting our social identities aside to say, hey, we need to collectively make this more equitable for everyone. So that's it for today. I tried to power through that. I know I'm over 5 minutes. Drop a comment. Let me know what you think. Read the article. I think it has some really good examples in there. Grab this book. Support your girl. Give me some feedback. And I will see you back here tomorrow for another episode of DEI in 5. Thanks as always for supporting and listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, all that good jazz. All right, y'all. Thanks. Bye.